face it would have been unable to locate my daughter and son-in-law and the baby.
To see any human dead is bad enough, but to see a baby, it is something I'll never forget. Where is the husband?
He was living a double life.
Barely legal porn. Make $1 million. Yeah, I mean, they were all there.
This was something more here than just a random murder. Could it be the father? Could it be the grandfather?
Rachel could have killed herself.
I wasn't 100% sure that he was guilty.
Hopkinton, Massachusetts, an icy winter's evening. Joanna Gately waits anxiously for the police outside the house of her friends, Rachel and Neil Entwistle.
She had been invited there for dinner, but it appeared no one was home. No one was answering the door anyhow.
You got your call. You think your neighbors?
Joanna Gately was Rachel's best friend. She knew that Rachel was expecting her. It wasn't like her to be irresponsible.
Hello? Anybody home?
Her main concern was that it's very unlike Rachel to have missed that dinner engagement and to have forgotten.
Rachel and Neil have a 9-month-old baby. Where could they have gone?
Joanna had talked to Rachel's mom, and Rachel's mom hadn't heard from her either, and that was even more unusual.
Rachel's parents, Joe and Priscilla Matarazzo, are certain something's happened to their daughter.
Rachel and her mother were unbelievably close. It was the first time, and as long as Priscilla could remember, that she didn't talk to her daughter all day. And she had tried to call repeatedly and got no answer.
The lights were on inside. You could hear the dog barking. So it appeared either someone might be in there or someone may have just left. My initial feeling was that they had forgotten about the dinner engagement.
You know, they have a baby. They might have went to the hospital or something.
Maybe the baby is ill and they have to go to the hospital. Or in a worst case scenario, it's the winter time during heating season. There might be a carbon monoxide problem in the house.
Sergeant Sutton decides to break in to check no one needs help.
Let me just try this, all right?
I was able to open the lock on the front door with the credit card.
Hello? Anybody here?
I called out a few times. It appeared no one was home. Many people keep their dogs in a crate when they're not home. He seemed well cared for. It didn't seem like he'd been in there a long time. We let the dog out to relieve himself.
Moving right across the country. The good news is it's not cold enough to make.
In the kitchen, there was a television on.
Even on Saturday, there'll be a mix.
And there were dishes where someone had eaten recently.
There was no car in the garage. Maybe there was an emergency, and the family left in a hurry.
I was able to walk through the house. The bedroom looked unkempt. The bed wasn't made. There was a thick comforter, and it was sort of pushed up. Nothing out of the ordinary. I told Joanna, it looks like they went out. And then we left.
Rachel's parents don't buy it. Their daughter would have phoned. What could have happened to Rachel and her family? 7 years earlier, Rachel went as an exchange student to the University of York in England. She joined the university rowing team. That's where she met Neil Entwistle.
Rachel really thought that she had met her Prince Charming. Neil Entwistle was this dashing, handsome man that held her hand and read her poems, and it was so romantic. She was madly in love, and their relationship moved very quickly. That, you know, they were an item almost immediately, and then they were married before you knew it.
2 years later, Rachel gives birth to Lily and Rose, and the couple decide to move to the U.S.
Rachel wanted to raise her child around her family back here in Massachusetts. Her parents, Joe and Priscilla Matarazzo, welcomed them in with open arms. And the family loved them. Everyone seemed blissfully happy.
Rachel set up a website, Neil and Rachel, and she was constantly updating people on how perfect her life was and how beautiful her baby was and how handsome her husband was.
After 4 months with Rachel's parents, they move into their dream house in upscale Hopkinton. But now, all three are missing. Rachel's father, Joe Matarazzo, calls their old friend Joe Flaherty, who was with the state police. Maybe he can help.
He said, we've been unable to locate my daughter and son-in-law and the baby.
Priscilla and Rachel, they talk with one another every day?
They hadn't been heard from since Thursday, and it was Sunday. I could hear the concern in Joe's voice, and Joe was not an excitable guy. Something is wrong. I told him that I would make a call to Hopkinton Police, see if they could assign a detective, bring him in right away.
The family's opinion at this point was that it's more serious than that they just forgot a dinner engagement.
You better get back to our house.
It had been another 24 hours. No one had heard from them. Yeah, very, very concerned.
They checked hospitals, they made their own calls, they were calling the police constantly to see if there were any updates and if anyone had heard from the family or had heard from Neil or located the vehicle.
Detectives check with hospitals and police stations, but there's no sign of the missing family.
Detective Van Rutland and I wanted to go back to the house to try to determine where they had gone so we could contact them and find out their status, their well-being. The neighbors had the garage door code, so we just went in through the garage door. There was still no car in the garage. Everything looked exactly the same as it had the night before.
Everything was still in boxes. The dog was still in his crate. Something was definitely wrong.
And then both Detective Van Rutland and I noticed an odor, like dirty diapers, that wasn't there the night before. So we followed our noses up to the second floor, where it was stronger still.
We went into the bedroom. Maybe there was some other evidence, either like a plane ticket or some receipt laying around that the guys didn't see the night before because they weren't looking for it.
I noticed on the floor, down next to the bed in the nightstand, a watch, reading glasses, and a cell phone. Things that a person would leave there when they get into bed. So I reached out and lifted up the comforter and looked. I saw a foot. I remember being surprised and a little upset.
Scotty, you gotta get in here.
I called out to Detective Van Rutland.
The foot was a purplish color, essentially the typical signs of lividity. We went to the head of the bed, pulled the comforters back. Oh, man.
It was horrific. We both instantly knew what we were looking at. There were photographs and pictures in the house. This was obviously the woman and the child, Rachel and Lily. Rachel was in a fetal position, and Lily was lying in front of her, as if she was cradling her. It's emotional, yeah. It's difficult.
To see any human dead is bad enough, but to see a baby is something I'll never forget. So the next thought in my head was, where is the husband? Is he still in the house?
So the whole family could have been murdered. We felt we should search the rest of the house to see if Neil's body was somewhere in there.
There's no trace of Neil Entwistle. No clue as to what could have happened to him. When he finally turns up, he's somewhere no one would ever guess. Detectives find Rachel Entwistle and her 9-month-old baby Lily dead in their Hopkinton home. Husband and father Neil Entwistle has disappeared.
There was no blood splatter on the wall. I didn't see any bullets. There was no other sign of a struggle. There was no sign of a break-in. There was no sign of theft. Valuable items were laying around, and none of which were touched. My initial reaction was either suffocation or poisoning, but we really had no idea.
When I first started investigating homicides, you might spend 4 or 5 hours at a crime scene. Today, you might spend 2 or 3 days at a crime scene because there is so much that you can do forensically. It has become a science.
Hopkinton police gave Rachel's parents the horrific news.
I'm afraid I have some bad news.
They were shocked and devastated. Just incredible grief and pain.
No, there's gotta be some mistake.
This was the last place on earth that you would ever think that you would find a slain infant and her mother. But where is the father of this little girl?
Joe and Priscilla were concerned that something horrible had happened to Neil also. They didn't know if there was a home invasion and they kidnapped Neil and something bad had happened to him.
Rachel's parents are close to their daughter's husband. In the 4 months they've lived under the same roof, the bond had grown tight.
Her family had welcomed Neil Entwistle into the fold of their lives very readily, and they accepted him and loved him. They saw him as a successful, honest, loving dad.
Joe and Neil would often spend time together.
Joe Matarazzo had a gun collection, and he showed Neil how to shoot. He brought him to the firing range where they just target practiced.
The missing persons case is now a murder investigation. The first job for detectives is to piece together Rachel and Lily's final movements and find the husband.
The last time that family were seen together was on a security camera in the mall on a Thursday night. It was now Sunday evening. The thought in my head was, we need to find Neil. Where is he? The car is gone, and now I can't find him. Where did he go?
Van Ralton follows the only lead he has, Neil's car.
We had the license plate for the vehicle. Neil is originally from England. Maybe he went back to London. So I contacted the parking department at Logan Airport in Boston. Within 20 minutes, I received a phone call back saying, yes, it's in our central parking. It arrived here on Friday evening. State police ran some of the flight manifests to find out, is he still in Logan Airport? Did he get on a flight? Within a few hours, we had discovered that he had flown back to London Saturday morning.
When they found his car at Logan Airport, I think people started to assume that maybe, just maybe, this Neil Entwistle character was up to no good.
You don't jump to conclusions, but you certainly, as an investigator, are wondering, why do we have a mother and a daughter dead in their own home, and the husband and the father got on a plane alone with no luggage and headed back to London?
We asked the Matarazzos, is there any reason for him to go to London? Did he have a business appointment? They had no knowledge of him having a scheduled trip to London. At that point, all my attention was directed at him. We need to talk to him because who would run? What is he running from? Where is he going?
On the Monday morning, the doorbell rang at the Entwistle home in Worksop in England.
Neil!
He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days.
Well, he's supposed to be in the States. His parents certainly don't want to see him back there without asking some questions. Neil, what the hell are you doing here?
He told his parents something terrible has happened to Rachel and Lillian. They are both dead.
His father must have said, "What happened? What do you mean you found your wife and kid dead?"
Neil said that he went out that Friday morning. When he came back home, he found Rachel and Lillian dead in the bed. They had both been shot. He said that he called police, but after police arrived, he went to his in-laws and they weren't home. So he said he went back and found himself at Logan Airport, where he hopped on a plane back to England. His parents were just paralyzed. Their granddaughter and daughter-in-law are dead. But they didn't know what to do. Then Cliff pulled it together, called the police, and he took Neil's passport and handed it in to show that his son wasn't running away.
His father then calls Joe Matarazzo in the US and tells him that Neil is with him. He puts Neil on the phone with his father-in-law. Neil tells Rachel's father that he is sorry. He doesn't know what happened. And he repeats what he told his own parents.
I left in the morning. When I came back, I found them like that. They were both dead.
Joe asked Neil, "Why did you run away? Why didn't you help? Why did he have a one-way ticket back to England?" He just couldn't understand his behavior.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do.
So he told Neil, "Call the police."
Joe Matarazzo reported that phone call to us. As we were still processing the crime scene, Neil was at his parents' home.
44072. It's just unbelievable.
Wow, he's in England. It's the number.
Really?
Yeah. He's at his parents'.
I guess that doesn't look good.
Is there a situation here that nobody knows about that caused this mother and daughter to be killed?
We don't want to jump the gun. We just want to find out what happened. Why is he in England?
Is Neil in danger?
All right.
Detectives decide it's time to speak with Neil.
Mr. Entwistle, it's Detective Bob Manning from Boston State Police. Would it be possible to speak with Neil?
As an investigator, you're not judging. You're just collecting the information. My goal for the whole conversation was to obtain as much information as I could.
Neil Entwistle.
I did not want to get into a situation where the conversation would end abruptly.
So Neil, I wonder if you can just help us out and tell us just exactly what happened.
One of the things I needed to try and obtain some information about was, what is the reason you left? Is there something in your life that you're in trouble? Or what was going on that could have possibly had this end result? Do we need to worry about you possibly committing these atrocious acts?
Can you go through it with us and tell us what happened?
All of us were passing him notes, what happened, what had occurred. He said he left the house early Friday morning, did some errands, and then came back to find both Rachel and Lillian shot in bed. We all looked at each other, and we couldn't believe it. The autopsy hadn't been done yet, and we hadn't known that they were shot. That was a very key piece of information.
Neil, when you found them...
Were they right on top of the bed? No, they were. The covers were partially up. When I walked in, I couldn't see Lily. I could only see Rachel, and she just looked asleep. And then as I got closer, I could see the blood. And I pulled the the covers back, and that's when I saw Lily was such a mess.
Okay. So what did you do then?
He said he doesn't really know what to do, doesn't call the police, he doesn't know why.
I went downstairs and I took one of the knives out of the block of knives I had in the kitchen. Yes. So, you know, maybe I could, you know, but I just didn't have the courage to do it.
We all were shocked as, well, you just find your wife and your baby dead, and the first thought that comes to your head is that you want to kill yourself?
One of my thoughts was this supposed to be a murder-suicide? And did he just cow her out?
I then got in the car and started to drive towards Carver. I, you know, knew that Joe has guns in the house. I thought maybe I could kind of get myself that way.
What did you do then? Did you go to Joe's?
And I got to the house, but I couldn't get in the house. I thought, well, probably the best bet. I don't know where Joe works, but I didn't know where Priscilla works, so I thought I would drive up to go find Priscilla to, you know, let her know. And then, but as I drove up, I couldn't remember how to get there, and drove around for quite a while. And I'm not quite sure what was going through my mind at that point. I ended up at Logan Airport.
Okay.
Why didn't you call us?
I didn't know what to do.
Are you in some kind of danger here? Is there something we need to be aware of?
We're all thinking that Neil's comments on the phone, his actions, he's not acting like a grieving husband. Everything is very suspicious.
I think Neil was his own worst enemy in this. The focus was so intensely on Neil Entwistle because he left. That, you know, certainly put him in the glare of suspicion.
Detectives now begin to pick apart the life of Neil Entwistle. What they discover completely changes the course of the investigation. Neil Entwistle tells police that he found his wife and daughter dead when he got home. Something doesn't seem right about his story, so detectives start looking into the life of the charming Englishman, beginning with his computers.
Neil and Rachel had just a life of their own online. You had pictures almost of everything they did.
It seemed that they were building the typical suburban life, beautiful house, beautiful wife, gorgeous baby. The two of them were living out this fantasy together.
Digging deeper into the computer files, police experts uncover another, much darker side to Neil Entwistle, one that Rachel knew nothing about.
Here's this guy who presents himself as impeccable, but he is not what he appears to be. He was living a double life online.
His laptop reveals the deception begins soon after he and Rachel get married.
2 years after they were married, they had their first baby. Well, that changes the equation. Rachel didn't work. Neil was going to be the breadwinner, but he didn't make enough money.
Now Neil's under complete pressure to provide for this family that he can't afford at all.
Neil studied electrical engineering. He knows about computers. So he starts looking to make money on the internet.
He tried to set up a computer business, also sold pirated software over eBay.
These are little deals, paying peanuts. Neil needs a bigger payday. So he goes to the sleazy side of the net.
I got hold of one of his online deals. It said, get in on this big multi-million-dollar industry, build your own porn site. It's spam, it's smut, it's lousy deals.
The other scam was barely legal porn. Make $1 million. He sold services and goods that he never delivered on.
A lot of the eBay transactions that he had were fraudulent. They generated such negative reviews that eBay had shut him off.
And sometimes he used his wife's account. So Rachel started to get these angry emails from people saying, you scammed us, you screwed us, we want our money back. She didn't know what exactly Neil was up to, but I think that she started to ask some questions. But Neil was suave and he could talk a good game. I think the two of them did whatever they needed to do to keep the illusion of their perfect suburban life together alive.
Did any of these angry customers try to get their money back?
That was one of the first possibilities that came out of this. Was it an angry customer on eBay who came gunning for the family?
There were emails that were very threatening. These individuals could be responsible for causing harm to his family.
Most of the aggressive emails come from England. Detectives need to investigate.
We arrived in London, met with a team from Scotland Yard, and asked for their assistance in this investigation.
While in London, the detectives also want to interview their main suspect.
We had phone conversations with Neil. With the help of the English authorities, we had a meeting set up in the embassy.
But Neil went by his lawyer's office first, who'd said, don't step in the United States Embassy, it's American soil, and you can be arrested.
Were we disappointed? Sure.
Police hit another dead end. They tracked down the scam victims. They're angry, but not enough to kill.
They would have to fly over, know where he lived, find his family, and then shoot a 9-month-old baby and his wife, and then never harm him when he was the one who actually was selling the pirated software. And there was no indication of any breaking into the house. It was quickly ruled out.
The detectives return empty-handed, doubly frustrated, having been unable to talk to their prime suspect.
The investigators were very concerned that he was just going to vanish, and that he could take off and they'd never find him.
One theory that gains favor is that money, or lack of it, is the motive for killing Rachel and Lillian.
The laptop that we had recovered essentially showed that after he got out of college, Neil was working, but he was living a little bit more than he could afford. He had racked up approximately $40,000 to $50,000 of debt in the UK. Just living expenses, he was living some extravagant lifestyle.
Before coming to the States. In the UK, they tried to live just like they lived here. They had the suburban house, and Rachel worked part-time. She wanted to be married to Prince Charming and have the perfect family. And he wanted to be the rich, successful person that Rachel thought he was.
The trouble is, in the UK, Neil works as an IT technician, pulling in an average Joe's wage. When the family moves to America, he becomes essentially unemployed.
He was the type of guy that got dressed every day in a suit and told Rachel he had an interview. And what he really did was sit around a coffee shop and peddle porn.
But he didn't have the big payday. I don't see how you're going to make money on amateur porn sites.
Even so, Neil leases a fancy car, and they move into a big house in an expensive neighborhood.
They pay $2,700 a month rent. He lived as if he was making $10,000 a month.
Neil tells Rachel he's earning big bucks from a business in England.
Rachel was under the delusion, as was everybody, that Neil was very well off. He had always paid cash for everything. He was very well groomed. He was very well spoken and articulate. And so that outwardly, he looked very good.
It appeared as though he was putting on a persona for Rachel's family.
But right from the beginning, Neil Entwistle was living above his means and was reckless. Reckless in England, reckless in America. Who gets a BMW as your first family car? Who moves into a beautiful colonial home in Hopkinton? Who does that without a job?
In 6 months in the US, he had racked up $30,000, $40,000 worth of debt.
Investigators now wonder, did Neil's financial problems begin to haunt him? Did Rachel find out about his sordid double life? Further investigation shows that Neil's business deals are only half the sleazy story. His email accounts reveal another murky side to Neil Entwistle. The charming and polite family man is addicted to hunting for sex online.
He posted a nude picture of himself on the website Adult Friend Finder.
He laid in a lounge chair in his in-law's backyard, took a picture of his naked body, and then superimposed someone else in the part that mattered the most.
It's gross stuff, but there he was, looking for hookups, while married with a new baby.
Before coming to the States. Neil also wrote a letter talking about how he was coming over here to sample what America had to offer in the female department.
Here I come, America. American woman, show me that you can do a better job than English woman in bed. That's the double side of Neil Entwistle. He was living a lie. The bills built up, and it just became a mountain of debt. Neil's financial world was closing in on him. He was maxing out his credit cards. So he must have known that the end was near.
Rachel started to ask questions, like, what the heck is going on here? It was fine to move into Hopkinton and you know, buy all this furniture on credit cards. It's another thing when the electric company is saying, hey, we're going to shut off your electricity. The bills are coming in, the threats are coming in, and what is he going to do now? Neil Entwistle was about to be unmasked for the con man and the fraud that he was. People were going to find out that he was really just a loser. All of that just became too much for Neil Entwistle to take, and he snapped.
Detectives increasingly believe that Neil Entwistle is the only viable suspect in the double murders of his wife and daughter.
His computer or Google searches made in the few days before the murders on how to kill with a knife, strangulation, suicide searches.
Then the results of the autopsy are revealed, and a shocking new suspect emerges.
A .22 round was recovered from inside Rachel's brain. It had entered through the top of her head, just above the hairline. Another .22 round was discovered in Rachel's left breast. Lillian had been shot in the chest area. You could almost draw a straight line through Lillian into Rachel's left breast.
Neil's father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, owns a few guns, and one of them is a .22 caliber.
It came back with Rachel's DNA inside the barrel.
It was a long-barreled Colt .22 handgun that Joe Matarazzo had trained Neil Entwistle how to shoot.
There was a water bottle in the vehicle that was left at Logan Airport. We retrieved some DNA forensically, and it was a piece of the DNA portion of the case that tied Neil Entwistle into the crime.
This means there are two sets of fingerprints and DNA profiles on the gun, Neil's and Joe's.
But it was a shock when the authorities revealed that the gun was fired again after Neil fired it at target practice. It was a shock.
Whoever left the later DNA very likely murdered Rachel and her baby. When experts reveal who it belongs to, the case is blown wide open.
It was Joe Matarazzo's DNA on that weapon.
It's an explosive discovery. Neil's father-in-law had fired the gun after Neil had used it at the range.
The police actually thought it could be him. That was probably one of the most diabolical parts of the case.
Of course, the media then said, oh, could it be the father? Could it be the grandfather that committed this?
The headline, I'll never forget it, was "Sleigh Gun Shocker." I even received a call from England saying, is Joe Matarazzo the lead suspect now? It was shocking. It was shocking.
Police bring in Joe Matarazzo for questioning.
Joe met with the state police and told them everything that he knew.
He told them that the day after the murders, he took that gun unknowingly and went to the target practicing again.
Some double-checking reveals he's telling the truth. Witnesses testify they saw him at the range. And the day his daughter and granddaughter were shot dead, he was working a 12-hour shift. The only other prints on the gun are Neil's. From the very beginning, the primary suspect.
Evidence was just stacking against Neil. He became the #1 murder suspect.
We're all thinking that Neil's comments on the phone, his actions, everything seems strange. He's not acting like a grieving husband. Everything is very suspicious.
For the Matarazzos, it was just total shock and disbelief. They still didn't believe that Neil could possibly be involved in anything like this.
Neil stayed with his family for about 2 weeks. They tried to discuss the story. Why didn't he call the police? But Neil stuck to his version of the events, and they believed him. This story just became so huge on both sides of the Atlantic. Reporters just besieged the family in Worksop. Here's this upright family, brought up on doing things right, and their son is accused of this unbelievably heinous crime. In the end, Neil said, "I can't put you through this anymore," so he moved to London to stay with his friends.
When the district attorney received confirmation that the DNA on the gun was Neil's, an arrest warrant was issued and forwarded to Scotland Yard.
Neil was alerted that the police were coming to arrest him. He left where he was and jumped on the underground.
Detectives monitoring his every move. So when he got on the underground, they got really concerned. And that's when they swooped in and finally grabbed him.
In Neil's backpack, police hit pay dirt.
They found a pitch. He was trying to sell his story to the highest bidder.
He really thought, I think in his mind, that he was going to get away with it.
After he was arrested, we recovered his parents' computers while he was in the UK. He'd been looking up information about US extradition, the US justice system, how our court systems work. He also looked up escort services.
Entwistle won't be paying for sex anytime soon. He's cuffed and escorted back to Massachusetts by US Marshals to face his accusers.
At the arraignment, Neil looked lost. He was just staring into space, and I don't believe he made any eye contact with the family. They felt horribly betrayed that their son-in-law was being charged with a brutal murder of their daughter and granddaughter.
He was charged with 4 charges: murdering Rachel, murdering Lillian, possessing a gun, and possessing ammunition. His plea is not guilty.
Every day, the press was reporting something new in the case. Neil was not only the prime suspect, he was the only suspect. The press was basically convicting him of killing his wife and child, and this is even before the first charge was filed.
Behind bars and awaiting trial, Entwistle grows increasingly dejected. Letters to his parents in England suggest he's contemplating suicide, and for a while, he's transferred to a secure psychiatric hospital.
His parents back home must have been sitting there thinking, what does this mean for the trial? Will my son get a fair trial?
Finally, 2 years after his arrest, Neil Entwistle is led into court in Woburn, Massachusetts, where his defense team drop a bombshell.
It was the most despicable thing I think I've ever witnessed somebody do in a courtroom.
In June 2008, the trial of Neil Entwistle opens. After the prosecution lays out its case, the defense team dropped their bomb.
The defense shockingly announced in court that Rachel was the one who pulled the trigger.
First, she shot her little girl, and then she took her own life.
That she was distraught, that the family was struggling, so she took her own life and she took the life of her baby. It was stunning. And then the medical examiner testifies that without a reasonable doubt, the baby is shot first, and then Rachel is shot second.
In an incredible turnaround, the medical examiner's expert testimony appears to support Neil's defense that Rachel committed murder-suicide.
Neil's story is that when he came into his home in Hopkinton, he heard a bang and went upstairs and found his wife and baby girl shot dead in the bed. He wanted to protect her reputation, so he took a comforter, pulled it over his wife and child, took the gun, and brought it back to his father-in-law's house. He didn't know what to do, so he found himself, he said, at the airport where he flew home to England. He's not a perfect husband, the defense claimed, but that doesn't make him a killer.
The Matarazzo's family was clearly broken. It was so horrific, that awful accusation that Rachel did this.
Whatever motivates someone to kill their wife and baby daughter just is inexplicable. But when they suggest that somehow Rachel could have killed herself and her baby daughter, that goes, I believe, to the character of this defendant.
I'd like you to just take a moment.
The prosecution's case is that Neil Entwistle is addicted to sex, and he's bankrupt and desperate. He's trapped by his lies, so he hatches a diabolical plan.
He goes to the Matarazzo home. He knows that Joe and Priscilla are out working. He had lived with the Matarazzo, so he still had his key to the house. He takes the gun. He goes back home. He goes upstairs where Rachel and Lillian are cuddling in the master bedroom. He points the gun at his wife's head, just above the hairline, pulls the trigger. He then shoots his daughter in the abdomen at point-blank range. The bullet goes through his daughter and into his wife's breast. Neil had shot the gun previously, so there's an alibi for having his DNA on the gun.
This image of Lillian and her mother nestled against one another, laying in bed, having a nap, that should be the safest place on the planet for a 9-month-old little baby girl. Instead, her own father comes in and blows a hole through her and then shoots his wife in the head and takes off.
The prosecutor then demolishes the defense team's case.
The prosecutor picked up the murder weapon and pointed it against his own head, saying, look how difficult it would be to shoot yourself in the head while you're wounded after you've shot your child.
Everyone kind of looked at the defense attorney like, are you out of your mind? Did you really think any of us were going to buy that? Do you think we're stupid?
They went through it, step by step to answer the question of, you're a loving father and husband, this is your wife and daughter, where is the 911 call? Where is the attempt to resuscitate her? Where is the attempt to get help for your loved ones? You don't do that. You drive to your in-laws' house 50 miles away, and then you drive another 50 miles to the airport. Never contact anybody, never say anything to anybody, and get on take a one-way ticket and go back to the UK, and not a word even after you get back to the UK. as to calling back home saying, this is what I found at my house, somebody should go investigate it.
Tension is high when the jury retires. Will the handsome and charming Englishman be found guilty as charged, or walk free?
He just was so aloof and cold throughout the whole thing. You had to wonder, like, I almost thought the guy was like schizophrenic. And it was at that point that I think everybody who knew anything about this case became convinced Neil Entwistle was in fact the killer.
The verdict was guilty. Neil Entwistle was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of 2 counts of first-degree murder.
Rachel's family were overcome. Neil's family, it hit them hard. The jury, they were shaken, and a lot of them were young.
Neil Entwistle was such a sociopath. He was really able to convince everybody that he was successful, honest, loving dad. He was actually a monster, a duplicitous, deceitful, horrendous killer. And it was very emotional for everybody, except for Neil. He must have known it was coming.
We disagree with the result that the jury reached. We disagree with their view of the evidence. And we believe that under a different environment, we would have reached a different result.
We know that our son Neil is innocent, and we are devastated to learn that the evidence points to Rachel murdering our grandchild and then committing suicide.
To this day, Neil's parents believe that the press, the DA, everybody convicted their son before trial. They felt it was a miscarriage of justice. They believe that Rachel committed the crime.
To think that someone we loved, trusted, opened our home to, could do this to our daughter and granddaughter is beyond belief.
None of us want to believe that a father could kill his baby daughter, kill his wife, but it happens. I've been in the business long enough, never come to a conclusion around how or why something like this happens.
As somebody who has covered crime for 20 years, you're always looking for a motive. And I've really come to the conclusion that some people are just evil.